going to talk about is what WordPress really is, and then what this course is going to cover because of what WordPress really is. So first up, what you need to understand about WordPress. What it really is it's just a database. And you'll see in upcoming videos is when you install WordPress, it actually creates a database. And that's ultimately what WordPress is. It's this general database that stores pretty much any kind of stuff that you want. So that's why WordPress is so flexible and can do so many things, because it's really just a database. Now, as an example, let's say you write some type of blog post. That blog post, that text you write, actually gets stored in the WordPress database. Okay, so how do people see it? How does everyone on the web see that stuff that's in the database? Well, that's where themes come in. And a WordPress theme really is just the pretty dress. It's what the end user sees. It takes all the stuff in the database, and then WordPress kind of automatically creates the pages based on the theme, and then the end user sees the result. And there are thousands, tens of thousands of WordPress themes out there. So for example, if I use the blog post example again, I can write this little blog post, and that gets stored. That text is actually stored in the database. Now I could use a theme that's very basic, plain and simple, that will display that text to the end user, or I can use a theme that's really fancy and beautiful and has all these bells and whistles. But they're really ultimately doing the same thing. They're taking stuff from the database and they're displaying it to the end user. Okay, now after themes, the way we really start customizing what WordPress can do is through something called plugins. And plugins are basically these little programs that get attached to WordPress after the fact. And again, there's tens of thousands of plugins out there. And what plugins actually do, remember, because WordPress is really this general, generic database, plugins kind of tap into that database and allow us to do specific things. For example, you can have a plugin that turns WordPress into a shopping cart. Okay, by default, WordPress and their database doesn't have that functionality, but that plugin will kind of tweak things around to allow WordPress to act as a shopping cart. Or you can have a plugin, for example, that allows you to show pop-ups on your website. Okay, so that's what plugins do. They take this general, generic functionality that WordPress has, and they allow us to do custom things. Now, the big thing to understand when it comes to themes and plugins is that themes and plugins, they always don't play well together. Or I should say they don't always play well together. Okay, and that's because WordPress is this open source program, more or less. People can take it and anyone can create a WordPress theme, anyone can create WordPress plugins. There's, it's kind of fast and loose. So what happens with all these thousands and tens of thousands of developers out there? Let's say a programmer creates a WordPress theme, and then you go to use a WordPress plugin, let's say to display a pop-up, and then that plugin won't work, or it will break something in the theme, or oftentimes different plugins will stop other plugins from working. And that's kind of the headache that we run into, that I'll talk more about in this course, how to get around things like that. But that's something really to be aware of, because WordPress is this general, generic platform, and there's all these themes and plugins out there that make it look really pretty and do all sorts of cool stuff. More often than not, or I shouldn't say that, probably about half the time, you're going to run into issues where stuff just doesn't play well together. And that's one of the frustrations of WordPress. But ultimately, it really comes down to this. WordPress started out as a basic blogging platform. It was just a way for people to sit there and type posts about their daily life or what was going on in their business. It was real simple, real straightforward. That's what it was designed to do. And it really caught on and got really, really popular and became basically the #1 database platform, so to speak, that's being used in the world today. Now, because of the rise of themes and plugins, WordPress can now do much, much more than it was originally intended to do. Remember, it is just kind of a general, generic database. For example, you can use WordPress as a blog, for a podcast, sales pages, sell physical products, sell digital products, membership sites, portfolios, landing pages, squeeze pages, video sites, and more. Pretty much anything you'd need to do online. And I have this asterisk there, and I'm going to talk more about this asterisk in just a second. But the idea here is that, you can basically use WordPress to run your entire online business. Now, you may not be able to use a single WordPress installation to do all this stuff. You might need to install WordPress more than once. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say, for example, I want to use WordPress as my main sales page. Okay, so I install it on my domain, let's say dave.com. Okay, so I have WordPress installed there. Now, I also want to have, let's say, a video podcast section of my site. Okay, it would be best for me, rather than try to come up with some type of plugin that's going to work on my main domain, just install a second version, a second copy of WordPress in a folder off my main domain. So it could be dave.com/podcast. It's a separate WordPress install, and then I can use custom stuff that will allow me to do my video podcast, and it will not interfere with my other WordPress install that has my sales page. So that's one of the techniques that we'll cover throughout this course. But getting back to this big asterisk here, remember, the asterisk is that WordPress is, once again, a general generic database. It is not built from the ground up for most of these things, and that's where we can run into headaches. For example, I've already stated that you can use WordPress as a shopping cart on your site to collect money and allow people access and all that good stuff. But WordPress has not been built from the ground up to be a shopping cart. So if you compare it to a shopping cart service that's been built from the ground up to be a shopping cart service, and that's all it does, feature for feature, you're not going to get the same level. The WordPress site just isn't going to be able to compete with that dedicated shopping cart site. Okay? And really the main purpose of this course, WordPress Secrets for Marketers, is to take care of all of these asterisks, the things that you're going to run into. You can really run everything and anything you want to do from WordPress, but you're going to run into headaches, and there's going to be gotchas, and you don't know which way you should always turn when you come to a fork in the road. And that's what this course is going to cover. It's going to set the record straight on what you do need to do and what you don't need to do, what works and what's just basically a bunch of BS. And the way this course is going to work is I'm going to start out real basic, assuming you have no knowledge of WordPress. Then we're going to get more advanced in the things that you can do.